Welcome to Technovation. I'm your host, Peter High. My guest today is Mark Papermaster. Mark is the Chief Technology Officer and Executive Vice President of Technology and Engineering at AMD, a roughly $10 billion revenue company based in Austin, Texas. In that role, Mark is responsible for corporate technical direction and product development. He's been with the company for nearly a decade and looking forward to getting his perspectives on how he has managed across what has been a technology juggernaut, as well as his view into where the technology is going and trends that will influence that. Mark, welcome to Technovation. It's great to speak with you today.
Thanks, Peter. Great to be with you here today.
Excellent. Well, so as part of your Purview, as I mentioned, you're responsible for corporate technical direction, product development, and within that, it includes areas like system on chip, the methodology surrounding that, microprocessor design, I/O and memory, and advanced research. I wonder if we could take a moment and talk a little bit about some of what you and the team are doing within each of those areas and kind of provide a bit of background.
You bet, Peter. Well, it's just a tremendous role that I've had the opportunity to have almost the past 10 years, having joined in fall of 2011. And it encompasses, as you said, two roles. So as the executive VP of our R&D side, our technology and engineering vertical that I run, it's really about the execution of how to bring leadership compute technology to market. And when you go back 10 years ago, it really meant a re-engineering of the engineering processes that we run. AMD had such a storied history of innovation, but at times it had a gap in terms of getting a new product out to market. And so, with those elements that you described there in terms of how we develop the roadmaps for our base engines, our CPU and GPUs, and put it together in system on a chip that combines all those computing elements. How do you make sure that those engines that do all the computations get fed? We call it feeding the beast. So you have to feed, a very, very high rate data rate from memory, very, very high data rate from the I/O, all the devices. When you ever see any photo of a computer, it's never just the CPUs or the central processors, the graphic processors. It's all the wires, and you see how you're feeding those engines to get all the calculations done. And that same structure is in a PC that you have, or embedded devices you have. It's that same architecture and engineering. So the key in that technology and engineering role was to it's just been a thrill, and that's working with the incredibly bright and innovative people in AMD and growing our team over the years to, as I said, re-engineer engineering so that our roadmaps are such that their leadership, our execution processes are such that we deliver to market exactly what we said we would do when we said we would. And that allows us to be a bankable partner for our customers because they know year in and year out we're delivering that technology. And also, continue that strong heritage, that culture of innovation that we've had in AMD. And then on the CTO side, it's about strategy and direction and helping with my boss, our CEO, and the peer executives in AMD and the whole engineering team, shepherding, how we make sure that directionally we don't lose a beat. And that also very much entails listening to customers. I probably meet with customers 1 to 2 every week. And one of our strengths in AMD is we listen very well. So I'm always sharing what we're doing, but then listening, hearing from our customers, how we can help solve pain points and how we may in fact need to adjust that roadmap going forward. So I'm really fortunate to have those two roles, and it's just been a ton of fun, and I see an incredible bright future ahead.
Clearly, a lot of what you're doing is exploring the art of the possible in some ways. You talked about collaborations with customers, for example. And of course, you've got a strong team around you as well. Talk a bit about how the team works as it develops, as it innovates, as it dreams up new products or new adjustments to existing products, as the case may be.
Well, we like to stay at AMD very focused. We pride ourselves on being scrappy. Our competitors are sometimes, much larger than us. They might be able to put more, resources to bear. And so we like to leverage our scrappiness to our advantage. So, Peter, we stay very focused. So, we have clear lines of business that we target, and then we have a great cooperation of our research and development teams, our R&D teams, with those lines of business. So, a typical discussion is, what problem are we solving? What value are we adding? And what are some of the gaps? What do we need to innovate on to add more value to attack a problem? It might be in a PC. How do we get dramatically more battery life? How do we get dramatically more graphics processing, working in tandem with our central processor unit? So the experience of that customer is just much more rich and enjoyable. We partner with game console developers. We're the technology underneath, working with Microsoft on the Xbox Series X and Sony on PlayStation 5. And I mean, what a deep partnership that is to create, an integrated experience. So those are each separate siloed teams working directly in deep projects with those customers to deliver a great gaming experience. And then all the way to the data center on the big server chips that we do, and partnering across the huge hyperscale data centers and enterprise OEM. So it's really about focused problem solving and delivering value. And our hope, Peter, is that any of our customers, they see and experience that value. It's a better experience for gamers, for just folks using PCs, and it's efficiency for those running massive computing and data centers and elsewhere.
Well, speaking of value, your stock has returned over 1,500% over the past 5 years, whereas one of your main competitors, Intel, has returned a bit more than 80%. I can hear in what you've described some of the methods that are used in order to develop these sort of game-changing innovations. Talk a bit about some of the other ways in which you see the justification of this tremendous value creation over the course of the past 5 years. What other sources would you attribute it to?
Well, it very much ties, Peter, into your question of how you drive innovation. How's that process work? Across internally and with our end customers. That is what's translated into the valuation of the company. When you look at AMD of 10 years ago, and even up through, let's say, 2015, 2016, why was the stock down? Because we weren't a broad-based company. Most of the revenues were on PCs, and then we started adding the game console to that. But it wasn't a broadly diversified business, and it was more dependent on some of the cyclical nature. Game consoles are cyclical. PCs have a back-to-school cycle, right? And so when you take that culture of both innovation and a culture of execution, and you apply it across every business line, and Lisa Su became a CEO in late 2014, and her mantra was, let's of course focus on innovation, but let's commit ourselves to high performance in everything we do, and listening to our customers in everything we do, and simplifying how we go about delivering that value. And that mantra, Peter, resonated across the whole company. And so what you've seen since then is like a drumbeat. We've been able to deliver to the roadmaps. You look at our first generation of a brand new CPU architecture, we call it Zen. And it powers the Ryzen line that goes into PCs. It powers the EPYC line that goes into the big servers. And that generation that released in 2017 brought a 52% improvement in computing efficiency over the previous generation. And we've already released generation 2 and generation 3 of that Zen processor, and been mid to high teens percentage improvement on those next generations. We've done the same thing on our GPU roadmaps, delivering significant not just performance, but performance per watt of energy consumed at each cycle. And so when you do that across each of your businesses, we became not only that same innovation engine AMD used to be, but delivering a diversified portfolio and delivering like clockwork. and it just translates the revenue. As you said at the outset, we were actually just under $10 billion in revenue last year, and we've now, and you look at the public projections from AMD, we're forecasting 50% improvement in revenue in 2021, and that is market acceptance of what we're doing, and it says that the game plan that we've done is working, and it says that we are listening well to our customers, and we won't change that.
One of the things I know that you, Mark, have said in the past is an important cultural attribute of this organization is open communications. Talk a bit about, first of all, its importance, but also how it's fostered.
Well, I'm a broken record at AMD with my engineering teams, and that is that communications is fundamental. It's just fundamental at every level of the organization. I have a mantra that our culture has to be first one of transparency. So when we communicate, there are no politics involved. It's just being open, candid. I mean, that's how you solve problems. You have to call out a problem before you can solve it. You hide a problem, you delay it, you sweep it under the rug. It doesn't go away. It actually festers. So, that communications has to be very transparent. You have to have a culture that's focused on problem solving. We talk about risk taking, putting risks on the table, managing those risks, and then ultimately making decisions and really having good clarity of decisions. So there's an element of communications in all that, Peter, and it comes together if you focus on those areas and you do it repeatedly. You end up with a culture of trust that gets built on that communications. And trust is such a powerful force. It ends up ensuring, such a tighter efficiency of execution, because you're not looking behind your back. Is someone going to stab me back? No, we're all in this together. We're communicating. We're managing the risk together. And the other thing that I always say, and it's contrary to some companies' culture, but I actually advocate contention. I call it creative contention. I love it. If you come to one of my meetings with the team leaders, you'll hear pretty robust debate, and you might say, "Oh my goodness, how can this company be tolerating such debate?" That to me is the genesis of innovation. You've got to have what I call that creative contention. But then, as I said before, decision making, you got to come together, you got to make decisions, you got to align and move forward as a team. So it's really all of those elements tie back into communication. It's a very simple word, but there's so many facets. And when you bring it all together, it's just, I don't know what else to say, Peter, than it's fun. I mean, we're working hard, but when you really can pull those cultural elements together, it's really fun.
That great examples there, Mark. I really appreciate that. There's a robust war for talent on currently, and especially for an organization growing at the pace that yours is, ensuring that you're bringing on a great group of people and continuing to build a great culture like what you just described can become more challenging the bigger you get. Talk a bit about some of the ways in which you've thought about building your team and the value proposition you propose to would-be team members as you go through recruiting processes.
Well, we're very open about the very discussion I have with you, the kind of culture we are. That doesn't work for everybody. And you have to be a candid person. You have to be able to collaborate. If you're not able to collaborate, that's probably not going to work for you at AMD. That's we're really built on communication and collaboration. But as you say, well, we're going tremendously, and actually that culture that I just described is one of our biggest selling points. What we're finding is a lot of people are almost suffocating sometimes in certain company cultures, and yet they're very bright, they're very talented. They see how our products are getting broad acceptance, and they see that they can join AMD and really make a difference in people's lives, because our products are just used in so many aspects of people's work lives and personal lives, because we all rely on computing. The pandemic has done nothing but accelerate how we all use computing devices and how we communicate with one another. And so it's our culture and our chance to really make a difference which is our huge selling point. And we find, again, the people that can align with our approach, they thrive when they get to AMD.
Very interesting. I wanted to also ask you how AMD uses its own technology. As you point out, AMD technology is in so many different devices. Part of it's an easy answer, just the various ways in which any of us are using technologies that might incorporate your products. But talk a bit about how the company is its own sort of first customer, so to say.
Well, that's actually huge for us. I have to say, Lisa Su did a good move about just over 4 years ago. In my role as a CTO and running the technology and engineering, she said, "Mark, you're so passionate about the technology you're developing. You're going to now be responsible for our internal IT, how we deploy internally that technology." And I think it's been just a great combination. When you look how that IT function has worked, and now organizations don't fundamentally change things, but they do make it easier, even easier to collaborate and to have a different vision. So when we took the IT team and put it right in with the CTO function, it really, I just give a big hats off to our IT team. They really adopted a much more innovative approach. They started really looking at how to be that early adopter, as you said. So when I told you about that new Zen processor line, they immediately got those first Ryzen CPU-based PCs, and often with our Radeon graphics included in that same device. It's called the APU. It has both our CPU and graphics and an accelerated processor unit, and started deploying it internally. So now our own users were the first ones to give feedback on those new units, and any suggestions to yet further improve the usability. As well, as we got into this rapid growth mode, Peter, we had to really change and drastically improve our own compute capabilities. To designing chips, and both the hardware and software for new chip designs turns out is incredibly compute intensive. So we had to grow our on-premise data center dramatically. We did it using the new EPYC-based servers, and we did it in a way that was very innovative in terms of pushing the performance. We used, for many of our engineers, the IT team developed virtual desktops. You didn't have to have a big workstation under your desk. You could run off of the server farm and have the same kind of performance. We also ran on the cloud. So we started working with the hyperscalers and taking some of our big electronic design automation, our big, compute intensive workloads that we use to design next generation chips, and we're running it in some of the, those huge cloud applications. And then lastly, we've been applying artificial intelligence. When you look at billions and billions of transistors on these chip designs, it turns out you can apply AI and machine learning to optimize how you implement those chip designs. We've used AI to really speed up our whole debug process. We've improved the gaming devices. So when you play games on AMD, we've actually do image optimization, and even some of our financial processes, we're applying AI and ML. So from the devices we use to even the applications and optimizations we run, it's been just a great job of our IT team partnering with each of the R&D and business functions in the company. And they're now a part of that whole innovation process as we deploy our own technology internally. We call it eating our own cooking, and recommend it to any company to really lean in as hard as they can on that aspect.
Now that makes an awful lot of sense. So we've started to talk about some of the trends that are most salient to your organization, artificial intelligence among them, for example. Mm-hmm. I wanted to ask you whether it's digging in deeper on some of the ones that you've already begun to highlight, or some additional ones that you'd like to underscore. What are some of those trends as you look to the future that you're particularly excited about?
Well, the key trend is not a new trend, Peter, but it's one that is, I'll say, fundamental for us at AMD, and that is the trend of exponential growth and demands for more computing capabilities. Why do I say it's not new? Because just look historically, central processors and graphics processors have been more than doubling every 2 years. I mean, that is an exponential rate that they've been on. But how you get that doubling is really changing now. It used to be that you got really 60% or more of that generational improvement of a new compute engine from the semiconductor technology itself, the very transistor building blocks that you create that processor out of. Well, that was called Moore's Law. Right? There's a lot of facets of Moore's Law, but what it really does come down to was that it was the predominant driver for all those improvements that we all have come to take for granted, generation after generation of your electronic products. But with Moore's Law slowing, meaning we're not getting all that same benefit of each new semiconductor generation, and frankly, those devices are more expensive, the amount of gain and performance that you get from that new transistor device is now not the majority. It's now, let's call it 40%, with 60% or more having to come from the design aspects that you bring about how you put all the pieces together. So that trend of putting yet more emphasis on the design capability to feed that continued insatiable, exponential growth of computing, to us, Peter, at AMD, that's really exciting, because that's our mission. That's what we're here to do. So it's like, okay, AMD, even more is on you right now. So we love a challenge, and now that challenge is simply growing every generation. And that's innovation's our lifeblood. So this is great. We're up for it.
Well, Mark Papermaster, thank you so much for sharing your perspectives from this vast purview you have within this fast-growing organization, the things you and your team are focused on, your vision for the future. It's been a great conversation.
Peter, thanks so much. Really enjoyed chatting with you today.